Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Tamin Incorporated, a full-service accessibility and technology practice. Tamin partners with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. Wherever you are on your inclusive journey, Tamin's team can help you with web accessibility assessments and accessible digital solutions. Tamin believes that access to information is a human right, so head on over to TaminInc.com and get more information. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor as well as training director and accessibility wizard at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am director of media productions at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you want your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certification and get more information about not only the ADS, but also your CPAC, which is the core competency. So if you're a manager managing a team of people and you want to understand accessibility at a global scale, at the social scale, the CPAC is a really great certification to study for. Any HR or any director of remediation teams or teams responsible for accessible content, it would be great to have that certification. So head on over.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hi, how you doing, Chad?
Doing well. The weather's finally starting to mellow out here in the Northeast. It's actually like a t-shirt day. I have only a t-shirt today. I think the last 6 months I've been in long sleeves when we do our podcast, but it's a really nice change.
Awesome. We are, I am watching my koi pond degree by degree, half a degree, because the pond right now, it's 57.5 degrees. It needs to be about 62 to 65 before I can really put the koi in to move them now that the pond is basically finished. So I'm just watching the temperature ever so, thinking all the different ways I could heat it up. Can I put some kind of barrel in there and light a fire or do something stupid? I don't know. In the end, I just need patience. And it's the one thing I tend not to have when it comes to my projects. People, I have patience. Projects, man, I just want to get it done. So,
yeah. Well, it'll warm up in all due time. I know, around here, when the pool first opens, the water's cold. It's wicked cold, and then as the weeks go by, it starts warming up a little by little. But, even in the summer here, when it's it gets into the upper 90s here at times, and the water's still, it's not hot, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not, it's not 98 degrees. So
yeah, anyway. We get nice warm water out here. So it's nice.
That's cool.
So. Yeah. Well, today's podcast, right? I figured we would jump into InDesign and talk about some accessibility. I don't know whether we want to call them tips or tricks or shortcuts, but I think things that you and I have picked up over the years that make accessibility inside our document easier, because we all know that we have enough to do. Most of us have been doing InDesign for a long time. And now somebody tapped us on the shoulder and said, hey, you need to make your stuff accessible. And now you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got this layer that adds this time suck to my job. And so we're going to share with you guys 5 or 6 tips that will help you kind of speed up that workflow.
Yeah. Yeah. So some things we could do in InDesign to just work smarter, more efficiently, and faster, right?
Yeah, I think so. So grab your pens and pencils, or somebody has a mini recorder. I heard one of our podcast listeners listens on her way to work with a mini recorder. And then when she gets to a point where it's a good nugget, she'll turn it on and record it for later, which I think is awesome.
That's great. So, that's a great idea.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Especially if you're driving.
Awesome.
Right. You don't want to,
yes.
You don't want to be taking notes while you're driving. We don't want to be,
we don't want to be
responsible for any of that. All right, guys. Well, so let's start with the first thing, Dax. one of your techniques, right, that this I know came directly from you, but one of the techniques you use is in Adobe InDesign when you're creating your styles, you simply name them H1, H2, all the way through H6. You just name them what you want the tag to be. And by doing that, I mean, it basically is automatic, right? So like if you name it H1, right, it gets tagged as H1 in the PDF. You name it H3, it gets tagged as H3. And I know you like that technique. You use that a lot.
Well, the nice thing is when I have a simple document, I mean, I always start out that way, regardless of whether it's a simple or long document. I always start out with my base H1, H2, H3. In fact, if you go to the website, accessibilityunraveled.com, and go to the download section, there is a template of kind of what I start with for InDesign. You can download that template for free, and it gives you a good starting point. But sometimes in longer documents, you end up with multiple H1s and multiple H2s and things like that. So you do have to go in and map those to the accessible style, to the accessible heading level. The moment it doesn't say capital H and then a number, you have to map it. As soon as it's underscore H1 blue or H1 19 point because you have some weird thing going on, then you have to map those to the accessibility, the heading level. But when it's just capital H and the number, you can start with that as the style and know that it's going to export correctly in the PDF, even though it says automatic in that export mapping, export tag field in the style. So that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a backdoor technique because I'm pretty sure when you do that, there's no role map created.
Exactly.
Because you can't role map. You can't role map a standard tag to a standard tag. So it just kind of knows that, oh, it's already named appropriately. Let's just use it.
That's an interesting point you bring up though, Chad, because if I, by accident, named all of my heading level 2s just H2 and I export to PDF and I'm like, crap, these really should be in H3 because I want my title to be the H1 and my, major chapter heads to be the H2. And now everything that I thought was an H2 needs to be pushed to an H3. You can't go into Acrobat and say, hey, make all my H2s an H3 and push everything down because you can't use the role map to make a standard tag be a standard tag. But if you named it H2 underscore blue, whatever, then you could go in and make that swap. So I think it's a very unique circumstance where there's a problem with doing it, naming it H1, H2, H3. I mean, alternative, you and I always go back to the source anyway. Mm-hmm. And, fix it in the source. So at that point you stop and go, okay, I screwed up. Let me go back to my InDesign document and just change it there. And that solves the situation.
Well, I'm going to tag on to that a little bit because our discussion has kind of like, elaborated a little bit. Another thing that I will do sometimes is I will use a style called caption. Okay. With a capital C, right? So caption with a capital C, and I'll use that to format all of my captions. Right. You could do the same thing with block quote if you choose to. Yep. I mean, there's not a huge benefit in doing it. It's more just like if you want to make sure your content is semantically correct, right? But so for caption and block quote, you name the style exactly that. Caption, capital C, block quote, capital B, capital Q.
Yes,
so it's important you name them correctly. And so what you're effectively doing is you're naming the style exactly what you want the tag to be named. Now, it doesn't quite work as well as the H1 through H6 technique that we were just talking about. However, what really happens is that your caption and your block quote by default are going to get mapped to a P tag. But in your PDF, if you go into the role map and delete the role map that maps caption to a P and block quote to a P, now your tag name is going to be converted over to caption and block quote in the PDF.
Right.
So,
And that saves you a ton of time when you have 100 images in your document and you use the caption style to style your captions, then you can overcome the limitation of InDesign, which is that it incorrectly exports the tags. When you go into the export tagging, there's a little drop down list, P, H1s through 6, artifact, and several other different tags. And so you only have those as the ones you can actually map to, right? So InDesign doesn't get that there are a lot more other tags that you could use, and that's why it exports to that P tag, right? But we can remove it using the feature that Chad just was talking about in the role map by going into the role map and saying, hey, InDesign, you didn't do this right. It shouldn't be role mapped, so remove it. And you get to the role map by right-clicking on any tag and going down toward the bottom, and you'll see the role map, edit role map. And then the window pops up, and you'll see in the beginning of it is what the tag currently is. And then at the end of it is what the tag has been mapped to. You just select the one you want to map it, that you want to remove, and choose delete, and then you can effectively delete that role map. So great tip, Chad.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Yeah, it's it comes in really handy. I mean, listen, while we're talking about it, I mean, what we really need is for InDesign to give us the ability to map to caption and map to block quote. Now,
agreed.
One way to overcome that is if you use MadeToTag. MadeToTag does let you map a style to a caption or a block quote. So that,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it allows you to do that. It adds more tags to the mapping level.
Yeah.
That's
like
cool.
when you click on that drop down, all of a sudden, I mean, there's actually a bunch of them. There's like caption on top, caption on bottom, caption.
Oh, so it adjusts the reading order
I
even.
think
That's
so.
cool.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've not played around with that a ton, but there are actually options in there to be able to do that. So, and I think there's caption above a table, if I'm not mistaken. I should really take a quick look at that.
Well, what's interesting, right? So we put our titles above the table, right? Usually it's figure 2.5, table of sales for 2025, right? People often struggle as to what to call that. Do you call it a heading? Do you leave it as a P tag?
Yeah.
Do you call it a caption? And in this case, you could, in fact, use MadeToTag to call it a caption, or create that caption style in InDesign, like we were just talking about, and then either use MadeToTag or remove the role map altogether and get that same result. So that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So the next one is one that I tend to do, and it kind of goes along with, since we're talking about headings, is when I know I'm working with multiple people. It is a pain in the butt to go through and look at the 50 styles someone has created and try to figure out what all the heading levels are that they've used. I know you can click on the text and it highlights the style, but I'd rather just be able to look at the style, the paragraph styles panel. So what I tend to do when I'm working with other people is I add the heading level as part of the style name. I know we said, when we were talking about the previous step of only use H1 or H2 as the name, and that maps it automatically. But a lot of times we need an extra H2 or an extra H3 to make the design make sense, right? And so what I do is I either add it at the beginning, and I go H2 underscore or dash, and then whatever my style is, or I add it at the end, whatever my style is, dash H2. And that way you can very easily look at the tag tree and go, oh, there are 3 versions of the H2, 2 versions of the H3, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just makes it really nice from just working with other people, understanding where they are when they design the document.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're correct. And I mean, I take a very different approach with my naming convention, but I would also say, I feel like overall people have a tendency to overuse styles. Like They create way more styles than they really need. Like if they would just kind of back off a little bit and really take a look at what they need, they could probably get away with a lot fewer styles than what they created. Okay.
Well, and that's what character styles are for, right? I mean, you can take an H2 and apply a character style to it to modify it in a way that allows the H2 to stay correct. But then if you needed for me, when I'm like coloring my heading levels, I'm going to create a color. I would start out by creating all my character styles for the different colors I might use. So if my theme is red and blue and purple, right? Then I might create a character style for each of those colors, and then I can apply it to the single H2 throughout my document.
You could. I mean, that's certainly one approach. But like the one that I see a lot is people will create a bullet style. And then they'll create bullet first and bullet last. Right? And you don't need to do that anymore. That's not necessary.
Really? Because we got that tip from
Lori Rulin.
She said create the bullet first style and then the bullet next, and then you basically can allow you to have multiple lists that start over and over and over again, right? Is that what you're talking about, or did I misunderstand?
Well, no, so what typically happens is like when you have a bulleted list, you want extra space above the first bullet and then extra space below the last bullet. And so they'll typically create a bullet first, a bullet last, and then bullets for in between. But you don't have to do that anymore because in InDesign, you can control that with one single style.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
no, and I tend to then look at my body paragraph or my heading and use space before to accommodate to think about that space between the heading or the paragraph and the bullet. But I can see where that can get convoluted if your document doesn't have all of those elements in it consistently.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of times the bulleted list appears between two paragraphs. Right.
Sure.
And then that's a similar situation. It's like, okay, do I have a body called body extra space below and a body extra straight, you know what I mean? Like you could really start overthinking it.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it really is
a rabbit hole.
All right, man.
Well, Chad, what about the all export tags?
Yeah, so that's a really good one because I know now that this next tip kind of depends on you being familiar with your content, because if you don't really know what the styles are being used for, it may not help. But if you do know what all your styles are, InDesign has a feature called Edit All Export Tags, right? And so instead of you having to edit one style at a time and change the export tagging and then go to the next style and edit, the Edit All Export Tags brings up a list of every style in your document. And then the next column over has the tag that it's mapped to. So provided you're familiar with your content and you understand how you're using your styles, you could just go down that list and go, oh, that's an H1, that's an H2, that's a P, whatever it might be. And you could just edit all of your styles in one single location without having to go and edit each style individually.
Well, I will tell you the reason I use it is because I am infamous for copying styles and using them for other things. And very often I will end up with a PDF. I go start walking the tags tree and I'm like, I have 9 H3s in a row because somehow my bullet list got mapped to an H3. And when I'm going through that edit all export tags, I can very clearly see, that's a bullet list and that's my incorrectly mapped to a heading level. So
yeah, I mean, you're right. That's a really good point, Dax. You can use it to, what's the word? Like double check yourself or
QA/QC,
proof, kind of proof check it, because the other thing I run into all the time that kills me, like it drives me crazy because, people think they're doing something beneficial. But I can't tell you how many times I run into a case where they created a bulleted list style and mapped it to a P tag.
Right.
And I'm like, no, that broke it, right? I mean, it actually breaks the functionality because now your list is not tagged as a list. It's tagged as a P tag.
It's tagged as P.
Yeah. So I will often go through that edit all export tags, look for any style called bullet, and make sure it's not mapped to a P tag, just as like a double
Right.
check.
Well, and I think a lot of times what happens is their body paragraph is mapped to a P tag rather than set to automatic. So when they copy that style, they hit duplicate style and then change it into the bulleted list, they've locked that P tag into place unknowingly. So,
Yeah, that is a good point.
The next one, Chad, is one that you taught me, which is the shortcut for adding items to the articles panel. Now, I'm a fan of holding down Control or Shift, I forget which one it is, and selecting each of the items on my page in order and then dragging them all over. But you use a shortcut key, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody does it differently. Like whenever I teach the InDesign class, people will ask me, well, can I do it this way? And I'm like, well, that's an interesting approach, but the answer is yes, you can. Just like you said, Dax, I mean, you prefer to click on objects in the order that you want them to be read, and then you'll just drag them all over. And the order in which you click them becomes the order they appear in the articles panel. So that's great too. I mean, as
long as you get them all.
well, yeah. That in and of itself is a great little tip. But like for me, and it's probably just the way my brain works, right? I like to click on an object and say, add it in there. And then click on the next thing and add it in there. And the default behavior of the articles panel is drag and drop. And talk about carpal tunnel, right? I mean, like if you've got a ton of stuff in your document, you're just like dragging and dragging and dragging, and it becomes a little exhausting. So what I do is I create a custom keyboard shortcut in InDesign to add selected item to the articles panel. And that way I could just click on the object, and I'm a Mac guy, so I use the shortcut Control A for add to article, right? That made sense to me. And that way I just click on an object, hit the keyboard shortcut, and it puts it in the articles panel. So I can just go click, boom, click, boom, click, boom, click, boom, click, boom. You don't have to make the sound effects if you don't want to, but I kind of enjoy it, as I'm doing it. But yeah, I mean, for me, it really streamlines the process. It really makes it easy for me to add them. And I'll tell you, this is one of my favorite features of MadeToTag, is that there's a button in task 2 called Not in Any Article. And when you click on it, it hides everything in your document that's in the article.
Oh,
so now
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So now I can scrub through my document, and if I see a piece of text on the page, I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot it. And then I'll just, add it in there and then keep scrolling through. I mean, for one of my clients, they send me 3 documents every month, totaling about 800 pages, right?
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of pages. But using that feature, once I add everything to the articles panel, I just do a quick scroll through to make sure that nothing's popping up. And I'm like, okay, it looks like I got everything. So it's a really great feature. I hate to keep bringing up MadeToTag, but as we're talking about efficiencies, that's one of the things I use a ton. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, if you could do the same thing with a script. I'll bet somebody could script that for us too. Say, like, run.
Interesting. How would you know if it's in the articles panel? That would be the thing.
Well, I mean, InDesign knows. Right? I mean, InDesign knows the objects that are in the articles panel, and I got to believe that in InDesign, there's a connection to that object. So if you could just iterate through the articles panel and say, hide, I don't know. It's something to something to think about. That might be something we could
test.
Yeah. We always get ideas when we're doing these podcasts, right?
Of course. That's the beauty of who we are, Chad. So I want to, before I cover the last one, I want to cover one that you showed me. I learned on stage. We were at a conference and you're like, oh, just press the, you didn't even say it exclamatory. You just kind of were like, just press the escape key to select the table cell. And I was like, what? Do what? I have been using InDesign my entire life and never knew that if you just pressed escape inside a table cell that it would select it. I always take my mouse and I'm dragging it to the right until the cell gets highlighted.
And it's arduous,
it's highlighting other crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just being able to just put your cursor in the cell and hit escape was like, honestly, I used it yesterday,
nice.
buddy. I'm telling you, I use it almost every day. So great stuff. And then the last one I want to talk about is one that I think we both use, which is creating an object style for artifacting, right? So many times, well, if you're using the articles panel, this doesn't really come into play, but many times we're not using the articles panel, or we want to specifically mark something as decorative because of where it sits or how it is part of the content, right? And so you can right click on an object and go to object export options and then go to the tag PDF panel and then go down and change the source to artifact. And yeah, that's a process, right? Or you can just create a shortcut. And I use Control-Alt-O for me is my shortcut. And that sets something as an artifact. You're going to open the object styles panel and you're going to create a style called artifact. And then you're going to make sure you've unselected every single option, every modifier in that entire list, except for the one under export tagging, and you select artifact. And now you set a shortcut key for that. And that's where my Control-Alt-O goes into play. And then now, whenever I want to artifact something, I can just select it and hit my shortcut key, knowing that that object style has been attached to it. And it's, in fact, going to be artifacted very quickly and easily.
Yep. And to elaborate on that, did you know that if you option click on the first checkbox of all those options, it'll disable all of them?
Well, what's interesting is I always get confused because there's the nothing in the box. Then there's the line in the box, and then there's the check in the box. And I never know if the line in the box means nothing selected as well as the nothing in the box.
So the hyphen or the line, I think you're saying, is ignore. It means
okay.
Because, and this is really important when you're doing table styles too, because there's a difference between none and ignore.
Oh.
Like none is none. Like if you say
right.
fill with none, it fills it with none. But if you say ignore, then it honors what's there and allows it to come through.
So if you had a white box, well, let me look.
So if you create a cell style and you fill it with paper or
sure.
I'm sorry, you fill it with none
blue,
or you fill it with none, right? And you have a table that has alternating rows, colors. If you apply that cell style to it, it'll block out the alternating fill.
Oh,
because none is a thing that wins out over the row fill underneath. Trust me. I mean, and object styles
what you
are
want.
very
So what you want is the hyphen is
ignore.
Okay. Then
Yep.
what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah. Ignore is
awesome.
almost
well, then
preferable.
I learned something.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well,
awesome.
And then one other thing I want to say where I use object styles a ton, kind of as it relates to accessibility. A lot of times we got these icons that we're using in various places and we're often anchoring them to the heading, right?
Sure.
I will create an object style for that only records the anchored object options. And that way I can apply my object style and it will align that icon to the exact same position every time I use it.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So that way you basically set an alignment or a position and then it's going to lock right into that. So you don't have to be manually positioning that thing all over the place.
Well, and conversely, like if you ever go in and edit that object style, you're editing every icon in your document.
Right.
So
right.
you're
and that makes it beneficial, but also not. If
yeah.
you need a little space somewhere, you're like, I just want to edit this one, but not all of them. Then you're kind of
Yeah.
I want to close with one thing that is more of a workflow than a shortcut, but it is in essence a shortcut. I always I start my document by setting my heading levels, and then I map my H1 to Control Alt number pad 1, my H2 to Control Alt number pad 2, and so on and so forth. So that as I'm styling things, I hate moving my mouse over and clicking. I'd much rather just type my text, move over and press Control Alt 2 to assign a heading level 2, or Control Alt 3 and assign a heading level 3. It's my own personal shortcuts because I don't like dragging or moving my mouse over, hitting drop downs or selecting things. I'd rather stay on the keyboard as much as I can when I'm typing. So I'll set those shortcuts up for each of my heading levels so that it's Control Alt and then whatever the number for the heading level is. And then sometimes I will set the number 9 to that artifact, right? To that artifact style. So that way it's all kind of in one little keypad.
I mean, I do something similar. I just don't spend the time assigning a shortcut to everything.
Sure.
I just use Quick Apply.
Okay.
And with Quick Apply, I can, just press Command Enter, type H1, hit Enter, and it applies it to my content.
We should do a podcast on the use of Quick Apply and maybe some of the other tools that are less used, like the automatic table of contents. That might be another one that we should do a little podcast on.
I like that.
Awesome. Good stuff, Chad. Good episode. Hopefully everybody got took some good notes, and you can apply maybe not all of these, but some of these that work for you. And just remember, when you start applying and doing something different, you're going to feel slower. Just realize that as you get used to it and things take a little bit of time, that it will become faster for you. It's like when I first started to learn to type in junior high, I took typing and failed because I couldn't not look at my hands. And then I think I was in my early 20s when I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get this. And I taped the piece of paper on my keyboard. I put my hands underneath it. And I was like 13 words a minute. But now I'm like, 80-ish words a minute. And, it's a gradual pace.
I don't know if I've ever shared my typing class story online here. I took typing in 9th grade, I think 9th or 10th grade.
IBM Selectrix?
No. I mean, they were typewriters at the time, although they were electric typewriters. And then we got a couple word processors in that had the LCD display at the top, and you could type like 256 characters, and then you could say send, and then it would type it all out on the paper, and then you could kind of start over again.
We had the IBM Selectric typewriters. So they were electric typewriters, but they were still very manual feeling.
So my story is the only reason I took that class is because that's where all the girls were. And so like I was one guy in a class of 30 girls, and it was just like the best class of the day. Right. But because I played guitar, the concept of like being fast was like really intriguing to me. And so I did take it seriously, right? To the point that when I went to college, typing was a requirement. And I was there for 2 classes, and my instructor said, just come back for the final. I could have tested out of it. I totally could have tested out of it. But I just don't think I was organized enough at the time. And my instructor's like, you don't need to be here. So.
What's so interesting, Chad, I know we're kind of segueing here as we close, but I wonder, are typing classes still offered? It seems so weird now to me to think that people would learn typing in a class, because keyboards are so ingrained into everything we do at a very young age. I mean, even the keyboard on a cell phone starts priming kids at 5 and 6 to know where all those keys are. Do they even do that in school anymore?
That's a really good question. I don't even know. I remember watching, I don't think it was a TEDx. It was something like that. And this guy invented where you could like hold your hands on this LCD, and it would heat up, and then you could like move things around. But he also talked about having a keyboard that would move with your hands. So like
Oh, wow,
you could
interesting.
literally type on an LCD, but it would, if you knew how to type, I mean, I still don't know how this would work, but if you knew how to type and you moved your fingers in the right order, you could just type anywhere on the screen. And I always thought that was a really intriguing idea that I've never really seen, because even when I type on a phone, I'm not using my keyboard knowledge, I don't think.
I use swipe. I don't type
Oh,
letters.
you do the swipe
I
thing?
use swipe. I can do it with my eyes closed. I can do it with my thumb. I can do it not even thinking. My wife cannot swipe for anything under any circumstance. So, we digress.
Yep.
Guys, I hope you've got some great stuff out of this session today. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you are still here, we love you and appreciate you.
We do.
You listening to our banter. If you're looking for more training, go hit up our website.
Yeah.
We now have this thing called a waiting list. So if there's a class that isn't scheduled, but you want to take it, go look at the bottom of that class description and you'll see a waiting list. Sign up for that and we'll let you know the moment we schedule that class so that you can be included. All of our classes are 3 hours. They come with lots of handouts and all sorts of good stuff. Right, Chad?
I think it's great, Dax, because you and I pick our next class by rolling the dice. I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, you and I are like, oh,
I don't know if I rolled it.
Well,
I mean, I look at what the classes are and which ones are more popular, which ones we haven't done in a while. And I try to use, maybe it's a combination of
okay, like
chance
like
and informed decision.
Educated rolling of the dice, you know what I mean? But like, I guess my point is like, you know, we're like, well, we haven't done this class in a while, or we're like, oh, this one's kind of due to come up, where having a waiting list, we could just kind of look at that and be like, oh, wow, we got some demand here. Let's do that, you know, and it gives us a way that we can intelligently schedule the next classes that are coming up. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you all. Again, we want to thank Tammin for being our sponsor on today's podcast. Remember, Tammin partners with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. And they believe access to information is a human right. So head on over to tammininc.com to get more information. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.